Good evening. Welcome. And a couple of things we get started here. We've got there's a holiday schedule in the bulletin for some upcoming service times and things and any adjustments that are being made to the services due to holidays. So be sure to check that out. We'd hate for you to miss a service or be here when there's not a service. There will be a singing at Jeff and Julie Porter's house November 21st. If you like to sing, come to that. There will be no Compact Sunday this month because it's right after the Thanksgiving holiday. And, okay. Let's do our memory verse for tonight. You ready? It's a long one. Is this your doing, Johnny? James chapter 4, verses 6 through 8. Everybody ready? James 4, 6 through 8. But he gives a greater grace. Therefore it says, God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Okay, that's a good one. All right. Any other announcements we need to make tonight? There's some sicknesses going around, so be aware of those. Continue to remember the Sands in our prayers. Rich settle as he recovers from his shoulder surgery. Okay.
Let's do 549. Sunshine in my soul, 549. All three verses. There's sunshine in my soul today, more glorious and bright than glows in any earthly sky. For Jesus is my light. Oh, the sunshine, blessed sunshine, while the peaceful, happy moments roll. When Jesus shows his smiling face, there is sunshine in my soul. There is music in my soul today, a carol to my King, and Jesus listening can hear the songs I cannot sing. Oh, the sunshine, blessed sunshine, while the peaceful, happy moments roll. When Jesus shows his smiling face, there is sunshine in my soul. There is gladness in my soul today, and hope and praise and love for blessings which he gives me now, for joys laid up above. Oh, the sunshine, blessed sunshine, peaceful, happy moments roll. When Jesus shows his smiling face, there is sunshine in my soul.
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather again together tonight, Lord, and study your word. We ask that you be with Jason and Sam as they bring us the lesson, and that we're able to make application of this in our own lives. Lord, we know that there's many of our number that are sick and unable to be here, recovering from surgeries and such, and we ask that you be with them and return us back to them back to us soon. Lord, be with us as we go about our week, as we do our work, and return us safely here on Sunday to worship you again. We ask these things in your Son's name. Amen.
I forgot to get this started up. Good evening. By way of stalling, while I'm waiting for the computer to get going, I started it early, but then forgot to finish it, what it needs to do, and evidently it's going to think about it for a while. There we go. By way of stalling while I'm pushing buttons, I just want to say Randy Richardson does a good job of taking care of us in the as far as the way the building is, building stuff is handled. We've had some heating issues the last couple of weeks. And that's not a good sign. Looks like we won't be using this tonight.
All right.
All right, but
Hope
I
I
think
didn't
we
have
can.
any
I think we
speaker
can do this. Sorry about that. But Randy Richardson doesn't. Well, I don't know. Push a button, please, up there, Parker. We've had some heating problems in the building the last couple of weeks, and man, I sent a message to Randy, and it just gets taken care of. He just takes care of stuff. So I appreciate him a lot. And if you are comfortable in this building, then say thank you to Randy. If you're not, it's because I set the temperature. So, so there you go. Don't blame Randy. Anyway, I think we're ready to go now. So Judges chapter 18. We started chapter 18 last week. We don't have our. Oh, you do have that.
Yep, I got
Look
it.
at that. You've got.
have to
Okay.
Keep up.
The notes. Okay. Yeah. Oh, you can see our notes on this screen, but this screen is not going to cooperate tonight, and I didn't know that was going to happen. So, on that screen, we can't see notes. Okay, I feel like I'm rambling like crazy, but we started Judges chapter 18 last night, which starts us into a new. Kind of a new direction with the story we've been in. We kind of introduced that story in Judges chapter 17, and then got involved in the first couple of verses of chapter 18, and we're going to kind of recap those first few verses just to set the stage, and then we'll be ready to roll. Okay, so Judges 18, verses 1 through 6.
In those days there was no king of Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for themselves to live in, for until that day an inheritance had not been allotted to them as a possession among the tribes of Israel. So the sons of Dan sent from their families 5 men out of their whole number, valiant men from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to search it. And they said to them, "Go search the land." And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. When they were near the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young man, the Levite. And they turned aside there and said to him, "Who brought you here, and what are you doing in this place? And what do you have here?" He said to them, "Thus and so has Micah done to me, and he has hired me, and I have become his priest." They said to him, "Inquire of God, please, that we may know whether our way on which we are going will be prosperous." The priest said to them, "Go in peace. Your way in which you are going has the Lord's approval."
Yeah, I feel like we almost should have done like a flow chart of characters that we've seen involved up to this point. In chapter 17, we saw Micah introduced as a thief. Basically, he stole a bunch of money from his mother, and when she raised a ruckus about her money was missing, then he owned up to it. And then she rewarded him by giving him the money that he stole and dedicated part of that to the Lord, but with that money, then that part of that money was used to make an idol and an ephod and some things that go along with worshiping that idol. And then Micah ended up hiring at first his son to serve as a priest in his own household. So Micah's son was serving as a priest for Micah, which is kind of a weird thing to do. And then we get here into chapter 18, and we see that familiar phrase that we've seen already a couple of times up to this point. We're going to see again as we move forward. There's no king in Israel, and so everybody's doing whatever they want to do. They're making their own rules because there's nobody guiding them in the way of righteousness. Even though they should have had a king, right? There should have been a king amongst them the whole time, and that they should have viewed God as their king, and they did not view God in that way. And now in chapter 18, the tribe of Dan is getting involved in this story. So we're kind of caught up here. So We talked about this kind of more in depth last week, but we'll kind of recap here. We talked about the idea that the verse here says that the Danites had no inheritance. Well, they did. They were allotted an inheritance. If you go back and read in Joshua, when the partitioning of the land was made out, they were the seventh in line as the lots were cast. They were seventh in line. They were given an inheritance, but they just didn't claim all of it. And they had trouble taking over some of that inheritance because there were some tough people living there, and they were looking for an easy way out. They didn't want to go to battle. We also see some things at the beginning of the book of Judges that we read way back when we did Judges chapter 1 that showed that parts of the land of Dan were never conquered. And then just by way of acknowledgement as well, we had Samson, the judge, coming from this very same area where these men kind of begin this story in Judges chapter 18. So we see a lot of things taking place in this area, not all of them good. In fact, most of them not very good, with the exception of some of the things Samson does. But for the most part, the things that we read about the Danites is not flattering. It's not good. They don't take possession of land the way they should, and now they're involved in trying to kind of circumvent God's plan for the inheritance of what they were supposed to take over anyway. Anything else we need to add in that recap?
One of the things we talked about, the priest's name is Jonathan. He's named at, is it the end of 19? If I'm no, the end of 18.
End of 18.
Yeah, the end of this chapter, he's finally named. We kind of talked about the idea that he, pretty likely that he is the grandson of Moses, is what it seems like. There's also the possibility he's not, but most people who research this think that this is pretty close after Moses and pretty close after Joshua, that this is probably an earlier account in the time of the judges, and that we're just, because the book's, again, it's not chronological, it's more thematically driven. It's more driven by what's how we can relate one story to the next. And so we go from the Samson being a judge who was a Danite, and now we're kind of getting toward what the Danites were doing and kind of one of their big significant failings that they did.
That's right. I think the chronology of Judges is up for debate, but chapters 17 and 18 sort of comprise one story or one narrative, kind of in two parts, and then chapters 19 through 21 create another narrative or another story from probably also from early in Israel's history in the land of Judges, or in the time of the Judges, and not necessarily to be fit into the timeline between Samson and Samuel, or between Samson and Eli, and just because the story appears there in that order of the chapters. So we'll talk about some evidence for that as we move through. All right, so I think we're ready to move on and move this story forward. We'll take the next section here, verses 7 through 10.
Then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, and saw the people who were in it living in security, after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure, for there was no ruler humiliating them for anything in the land, and they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealings with anyone. When they came back to their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, their brothers said to them, "What do you report?" And they said, "Arise, and let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. And will you sit still? Do not delay to go, to enter, to possess the land. When you enter, you will come to a secure people with a spacious land, for God has given it into your hand, a place where there is no lacking of anything that is on the earth." Okay,
so, wow, I can't, when it's right here, I can see it. So Dan whoops, that's the wrong button, that button. Dan is way down here in this area, right next to Philistia, and Judah and Ephraim and Benjamin. And that's where we had Samson doing all his stuff, because he was from this tribe in the last few chapters that we read. And they are looking for land all the way up here. There's Dan right there. That's the city that they attack and rename Dan. So when we're talking about them taking this trip where they travel through the hill country of Ephraim, they haven't traveled far, but they're looking for new land to conquer. And it's interesting that they go all the way up there to the northern lands, and we've got Tyre and Sidon's way up here. So these would have been cities that were kind of under the protection of those city-states back before the Israelites entered that country. And they are far enough away from Tyre and Sidon that they're able to kind of attack this city without fearing repercussions from Sidon. Chuck?
That area was supposed to be the inheritance of Naphtali. wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, they're
So they're up there taking their brothers.
they're off the rocker. I mean, there's nothing good to say about what that, other than they're being industrious. You know, they're looking for something, I guess, work to do, I guess. But what was wrong with this area down here that they had been given? There was land down there that was unconquered. What was wrong with saying, hey, God, you know, we'd kind of like to expand our borders. Could you give us the power to go and take on Philistia? And those people that were there. So, you know, there was land near them that could have been taken for them to spread out. And it's not necessarily, you know, I think up to the northern parts, there's probably better land as far as being less desert and more arable, more tillable ground or whatever. So maybe they just weren't happy with their given lot. But there was land there that they could have conquered. They're going a long ways out of their way to do this. Justin, do you have a thought?
Yeah, you're saying there's nothing good you could say about them. I mean, I think if this was if these spies were the spies that reported back when they first entered the land, man, they would have conquered it. These spies come back, they're like, God is given into their hands. I mean, they know that because the priest told them that, you know, or whatever, the priest or the Levite. But I mean, the sheer amount of faith that they have that, yeah, let's go up here. I mean, obviously cross all of this country and take over this land, but do not delay. We can do this, guys. I mean, there's some form of, you know,
Some sort of faith.
some sort of faith, but
And I think that's an interesting observation. I think part of that might come from, you know, the original 12 spies were talking to people who had lived their lives in slavery and weren't really used to winning anything, versus these guys are talking to people who had led a conquest through a land and had a lot of major victories and defeated a lot of big armies. And so maybe there's just kind of a history there of saying, hey, we can go to battle and win because we've seen it happen before, versus early on they had no history of winning battles. So, you know, again, that's not an excuse for them to have ignored the spies when they came to the land, because they should have obeyed God. But it could just be a matter of perspective from what they're used to. Chuck?
And you still got the deal with Samson, you know, whenever he was doing what he was doing to the Philistines, and they wasn't willing to help, you know.
Yeah, and that Samson probably chronologically was after this story, so you know they wouldn't have known of Samson. Samson hadn't been born yet, probably when this story is taking place. But these still are fighting men. They're still willing to go to battle. How is it that by the time of Samson we have people that are cowering in caves and not willing to defend themselves? So, but it is some time has transpired between those stories, most likely. All right, we haven't got to our notes yet. And this, you know, working hard to find an easy way out. They have land that has been allotted to them, that has been guaranteed to them by God if they'll go in and conquer it, and they don't drive the people out of their own land. They're living with Philistines in their area, encamped in their land. They've got other enemies that are nearby. They're unwilling to take over their land. They're looking for a place. And what do they say about the place they find? This place is unguarded. It's going to be easy. We can go in there and we can wipe them out without any trouble at all. We got to walk, 100 miles to do it, or however far it is. But once we get there, it's going to be an easy battle. They didn't want to do the hard work of rooting out the armies that were there. They wanted to find an easy way out. There's a lesson there for us about, looking for an easy way out and not giving in to that temptation. When there's hard work to be done, we need to trust and have faith that God is going to help us do the hard work rather than looking for an easy way to do that. They get a good report for the wrong purpose. Again, the idea of the spies that are going in, and kind of that idea of the contrast between they got a bad report from the spies in the early story and trusted in that bad report. Now we've got a good report, and those spies that are involved in this, what if those spies came back and said, some good land up there, but maybe we ought to think about doing it the way God laid it out for us. Maybe those spies should have been a witness for what God wanted them to do, rather than giving the report of what they could do and giving it for the wrong purpose. So standing up for what was right rather than what was easy again. They didn't see any giants. They don't talk about the people other than it's unprotected. And then, the idea that how easily they invoke the name of God, when, in verse 10, when you enter, you shall come to secure people of the spacious land, for God has given it into your hand. And nothing in this story, other than their lip service, other than the things that they say verbally, demonstrates that they have any desire to honor God. They speak they talk a good talk, they speak a good speech, but when it comes down to the way they're living and the decisions they're making, they're not making good decisions. And so sometimes I think there's another lesson there for us about making sure that we're not invoking God's name in ways that pretend to speak on God's behalf, or put good words into God's mouth about what God will or won't bless, when really we're just speaking our own will. Because that's what they were doing. They were following after their own desires and then tagging God's name on it to try to give it some credibility. That's not the way that works. We need to make sure that our desires are God's desires before we put His name on it.
The major thing they're doing here is they're trying to claim for themselves something God didn't give them. Yeah. And this is something that is, it's not like, well, we all had to kind of make our own way in the promised land and figure out where we were going to be, so we've just decided to keep doing that. No, it was all delineated out for them. They knew where it was they were supposed to be, and they're choosing to go somewhere else, something God did not give them. And it's kind of a problem. They're trying to redraw the lines. They want to adjust God's boundaries for them. Here's the box you've been put in. Here's what's acceptable. Here's what you are supposed to do. And they're saying, well, I'd rather do something else. That would make me happier if we just went ahead and did something else. And it's really not a very it's not a good attitude for them to have. We talked a little bit about the idea that they're invoking the name of God. Did they ever ask God? At best, they asked a Levite after they came and said, hey, we recognize you as a Levite. What are you doing here? Hey, this guy made me his own personal priest. Oh, good. Now that I know you're a guy who's been made a personal priest for somebody, not at all the way God intended, how about you go ask God something for me? Did they not have Levites where they were from? Why didn't they ask Levites where they were from? Why are they asking a random Levite they've met along the way? Are the Levites where they're from not trustworthy? I don't know, but they shouldn't be wandering around looking for a Levite to tell them what they're doing is okay. That's not at all the method that they're supposed to be using to figure out anything. Later on in the book, and I don't know exactly the chronology there, but they're able to ask God plenty easily whether or not they should go up to make war with Benjamin, or whether they should not do that. It's pretty close to this, though, timeline-wise, it seems. The gathered Israel knows how to ask God something, and that's not what these people are doing. The other thing they're doing is they're hurrying to shed blood. I've referenced this verse before because I think it's a really good one. It's from Proverbs 1, 10 through 15. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol. Even whole as those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with spoil. Throw in your lot with us. We shall have all one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your feet from their path. That's what they should have been doing. Literally, that's what they're saying. Hey, come with us. It'll be easy to kill them all, and the land lacks for nothing. It's great with a bunch of stuff, and we'll be rich and we'll be happy once we go kill all those other people that God has never instructed us to go do that to. At best, Naphtali should have done it, but Naphtali didn't, and it's not the job of Benjamin to go take some space in Naphtali if that's what. that's not their job. It's not their job to go, well, Naphtali is not doing good over there, so I'm going to go away from the place where I didn't do good and go show them how to do good when it's the easiest possible circumstance to do well in that way.
Agreed. All right, next section is verses 11 to 13.
Then from the family of the Danites, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, 600 men armed with weapons of war set out. They went up and camped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. Therefore they called that place Mahana Dan to this day. Behold, it is west of Kiriath Jearim. They passed from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah.
All right, so the inheritance that they never really fully claimed is now being abandoned. They're just throwing in the towel on what God promised them. And think back to all the other stories that you can think of in the Old Testament where inheritance is like the main thing that somebody is worried about. Where, you know, this was the land of my fathers, and now I can't forsake this land, or I have to find a way to make sure that this inheritance goes to the right person and it doesn't go to the wrong person, or you know, there's so many stories that are wrapped around this idea of inheritance being so important. And then there's a handful of stories, every now and then we see a story where somebody throws their inheritance away. What did Esau do with his birthright, with his inheritance? You know, he gave it away for a pot of stew. And then we have the Danites here who have been given this land as their inheritance. And when it says specifically those cities, if we could go back in time and we could visit the time of Israel at this time, they would have had records of exactly whose families that was, of exactly what clan leaders and what tribe leaders were the people that had been given that land inheritance. So when it names those cities, that's like giving a genealogy or an accounting of exactly what 600 men are giving up their inheritance to go to another place to try to take another land. So it's amazing to me how quickly they abandon what God has promised them. And again, the lesson there for us, I mean, we could make a sermon out of that idea right there of giving up the inheritance that God has promised us, looking for something better. And in the end, we've abandoned what God has promised, and that's never going to be a good thing. And that plays out for us here in this story.
One kind of question this brings up here is this all that's left of Dan? Is this force that's moving through, is this everyone from Dan, or is this a small section? Because as we look at, presuming that the story of the judge, Samson. is after this, his father's from Zorah. This is one of the things in that area. So it's hard to say that all the Danites are in agreement about this. I don't know that they got the whole clan together. We've seen how Israel has broken down morally and theologically and in all these different ways. The clans are not, the tribes are no longer staying together either, it doesn't seem. It seems like the tribes of like Jason said, that are assigned to this area that's supposed to belong to them are the ones leaving. It's probably not all of Dan, though. And it might not even be all of that individual clan or that area. They're probably pretty broken up. Okay. The other thing, 600 men. How many people does Israel normally pull together to go fight a battle or a war?
Thousands.
Thousands. Many thousands. I mean, you look at when we talked about Gideon, the fact that it was 300 men was sent was just an astonishing sign from God that it was not man that achieved the victory, that it was from God. And so, again, this tells me that not all of Dan is very invested in this. This isn't an idea that all of the Danites had. Because even if this is early in the time, which we kind of assume it is, maybe 50 years or so after they've gone in the Promised Land, 50 to 100, right? In 1 Chronicles 12:35, Dan musters up 28,600 men of war in Chronicles. That's not that much later. It's not long enough that 600 men of war have multiplied that many times. 70 times men of war? I don't think that happened quite that fast, right? So I think Dan is probably not all together on this. This is a subset of people who've decided to go and wipe out a city worth of area. They don't, I mean, obviously one city probably doesn't hold enough area for tens of thousands of people to go live there prosperously. That would be difficult to achieve.
I think that probably answers your question about the priest. They found a priest.
Yeah.
They took him along, so.
Yeah, I think I have a note about that later.
Yeah.
You know, the first part of chapter 18 talks about they sent, when they sent the 5 men, it was from Zorah and Eshtal, you know, so you've got those men coming from just those 2 places. So it seems like that they had this idea of themselves, you know, rather than the whole tribe of Dan.
Right.
The whole, I mean, because it doesn't talk about
Right.
the other areas, it just talks about those 2 areas.
I think that speaks somewhat to the idea of the kind of the theme of this section of Judges is the idea that every man did what was right in his own eyes. We have a fracturing of the nation. There's supposed to be a unified nation, unified under God and under His rule, but we have little factions of people doing their own thing and not following the plan that God has. That doesn't mean that there aren't people somewhere that are following the plan that God set forth. It would be very difficult to make the case that there were no faithful people in Israel during specific times. In fact, at one time Elijah tries to make the case to God, I'm the only one left. And what does God say? There's 7,000 that haven't bowed the knee to Baal. And there were pockets, there were enclaves of people that were faithful in Israel at the time of Elijah that Elijah didn't even know about. And he was a prophet that went from one end of the land to the other speaking. And so again, during this time, there's very likely pockets of people who are being faithful and doing what's right. But there's still a fracturing of the nation in not doing what is right, and the overwhelming majority of people from one period to the next are not doing what is right. So I think your point is well made. I thought you were going to regale us.
No,
Okay.
I was looking at the Chronicles passage because when it's listing the people gathered for war here, it says that there's 3,000 of Benjamin, but that most of them had stayed with Saul. So we know that Benjamin was mostly wiped out. Now, I wish it told us how many were of Saul, and we could guess, hey, was it possible that Dan had really dwindled to only 600 fighting men left? Had they been so unfaithful and lost so much that that's all that was left, and they were able to rebound like Benjamin did in a certain way, but it's kind of hard to tell.
Okay, well, let's move on next section, 14 to 20.
Then the 5 men who went to spy out the country of Laish said to their kinsmen, do you know that there are in these houses an ephod and household idols and a graven image and a molten image? Now therefore consider what you should do. They turned aside there and came to the house of a young man, the Levite, to the house of Micah, and asked him of his welfare. The 600 men armed with their weapons of war who were of the sons of Dan stood by the entrance of the gate. Now the 5 men who went to spy out the land went up and entered there, and took the graven image and the ephod and the household idols and the molten image, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. When these went into Micah's house and took the graven image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molten image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? They said to him, be silent, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us, and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be a priest in the house of one man, or to be priest to a tribe and a family in Israel? The priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod and household idols and the graven image, and went among the people.
There's just so much wrong with this story. The Danites make a convincing argument. 600 armed men standing on your doorstep is a pretty convincing argument. It's interesting that as they're making their way on their way from Dan all the way up to the northern country, they pass by and the spies are like, oh, hey, guess what we saw in this house? We saw a man with an idol and lots of stuff that goes along with that, and he's got his own priest. I wonder what we should do about it. And they just detour, they go and take all the stuff, and as they take the stuff, the priest, you know, as you would, what are you doing? You're taking our stuff. And put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Like, it's almost comical. If it wasn't so sad, it would be a funny way to tell a story. But the part of the story that gets me is they describe, the five spies, right, describe it. There's a priest, he's got an idol and a graven image, he's got an ephod. How many of those things were okay for them to have? None of them. None of them were okay. And the question, consider what you should do. That's a real question. I don't know that they intend it that way. I don't know that there's any good meaning that they're saying behind it, where I wonder if we should go evangelize to these people. I wonder if we should go destroy this idol, or if we should wipe out the graven image, or if we should correct them in their error. I don't think there's any intention of that meaning behind it, but we can read that meaning into it for ourselves as we think about the things that we see going on around us. Consider what you should do. And the answer is not go participate in it, or go claim it for yourself, or go kidnap it so that you can take it with you. The answer is obliterate it, get rid of it. That's what we should do with stuff like that. And so it just impacts me as I read this story how prescient that question is, how relevant that question is, and how they totally miss the boat on what the right answer to the question is. Because they go and take it. They want it for themselves. So their actions reveal the depth of their depravity. If there was any question about their standing or their motives up to this point, like maybe if all we knew was there was a bunch of Danites looking for a place to expand their borders, and that's all we knew, maybe we could read some positive motivation into that, or we could read some positive motives behind it. But once we read this part of the story, we can't cut them any slack. We can't give any positive spin to anything else that they do, because they are on the wrong side. Don.
Verse 4, you know, the priest says something about what was done to him.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes you wonder, was he mistreated? You know, by him? And then if so, that maybe gives him more of a reason to say, yeah, I'll go with you.
Yeah.
I'll put my hand over my mouth and I'll run with you.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder. That's the speculation part, wondering if that's the real case.
Yeah, could be if you read verse 4 that way. It doesn't seem that, you know, I mean, he doesn't seem to be completely unhappy serving with Micah, but it is kind of small potatoes compared to what he's being offered with the Danites. And so the joy of the priest in going with them reveals his motivations. So if there's any way through the story, I mean, there's not really any way to put a positive spin on the priest up to this point, because he's worshiping an idol, and he's doing it for, you know, he's doing it so he can earn a living. You know, there's nothing good about what he's done up to this point. But if there was any way to put a positive spin on it till now, there's not now. Now it's completely we completely understand his motivation. He wants to have as large of an influence for idolatry as he can possibly have. Nothing good at this point in the story. Chuck.
Well, it makes you wonder too, is was he thinking, well, I'm getting this much from Micah, but these are a whole bunch of guys, and maybe I can get a whole lot more.
Oh yeah, his per diem just went way up. He's going to be taken care of now. So your turn.
Yeah, so the Danites here are basically marauders. I mean, they've already basically set an end point on their journey. Hey, we're going to go here and we're going to kill these people who aren't Israelites because we want their stuff and it looks great and easy to take. So we're going to do that. They weren't told they could do that. It's not in their territory. So the action is pretty wrong. It's not like the Israelites weren't told to get rid of the non-Israelites, but this isn't an acceptable way of doing that. This isn't within the bounds they were given of fulfilling that mission. what the spies come back with, and I mean, like Jason said, it's like saying, hey, the guy at the car lot is selling all the cars for $100 because he killed the guy who had the car lot, and he's just lying, and they're not his cars, but he'll sell them to you and give you a bill of sale. So let's all go to the car lot and buy the $100 cars. That's not right, that's not good, and that's what the spies essentially do. They say, hey, this guy's got molten image, a graven image, an ephod, he's got frieze, he's got a lot of cool stuff. Let's go. So they all, like he said, they stand outside the gate and they're like, hey, let's have the stuff. And one of the guys says, hey, why are you doing this? And he says, hey, you're part of this stuff, let's go. They're just a roving band causing problems at this point. They're not out here attempting to serve God in this moment. So the fact that they even asked, hey, will you inquire of the Lord if this is okay to do? Yeah, sure it is. It's like they think that because that one Levite said that, again, we have no record of him actually asking God, well, we need that whole setup to come with us. It's like thinking, well, we should take the Ark of the Covenant to battle with us, because we certainly won't lose then. The Levite who said yes, and all the stuff he worships with, if we take all that with us, then we'll be fine. That means we can just keep the good things going. And they're essentially superstitious bullies running around trying to get things that they want. It's not at all how God's people were supposed to be acting. One of the most important things they do is they take their yes man, the guy who said that they'd be prosperous. They say, hey, come with us. We want you to come with us. In fact, they just tell him, come with us. And if you're the Levite and you're supposed to be telling them what to do, but they come up and they say, hey, we're going to go do this. You got to come with us. There's not an option. Are you taking someone who's supposed to be a father and priest to you, or are you taking someone you get to boss around and tell how it's going? Again, that's not how the priesthood's supposed to operate. They're supposed to be completely separated from like the payment system that the Danites would have been using. They're supposed to get their money and their assurance from the land, from everybody, so that no individual little group can come and say, hey, you're not going to get paid if you don't tell us what we like. You have to do what we want. That's not how it's supposed to operate, but it is how it's operating when the guy's in it for the money on the first place. He's already not doing what he's supposed to be doing. Jonathan isn't. And from his perspective, he's trading up teams. In chapter, one of the last verses of chapter 17, 11, says the Levite agreed to live with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. He was getting treated very well, it seems, by Micah. He got brought into the household. He actually got to replace the son who was a priest. He gets assurances. He gets money. He has security. I mean, Micah's well enough off that he has gates to his area. He has it seems like he has some kind of wall around everything he has. He has a lot. 1,100 pieces of silver that his mother gave him is a lot of stuff. And Jonathan doesn't even take this and say, okay, I got lucky getting this. I should just stick it out here. He doesn't even do that. He trades teams like it's pro football, and he got a better offer. This is literally just money and fame for him. Hey, if you come with us, you'll be father and priest to a whole tribe. And it's just the motivations are so poor on everybody's part. There's not one person here attempting to represent God or his will. And all of them are supposed to be people who should be doing that. They were supposed to be a nation with a priesthood, but they were all supposed to know about it. They were all supposed to teach their children about it. And no one here can do that, or they choose not to. Either way, it's a deplorable situation.
It is a deplorable situation. Okay, next section, 21 to 26.
Then they turned and departed and put the little ones and the livestock and the valuables in front of them. When they had gone some distance from the house of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house assembled and overtook the sons of Dan. They cried to the sons of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, "What is the matter with you that you have assembled together?" He said, "You have taken away my gods which I made, and the priest, and have gone away, and what do I have besides? So how can you say to me, what is the matter with you?" The sons of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, or else fierce men will fall upon you, and you will lose your life with the lives of your household." So the sons of Dan went on their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house.
So Micah is, well, he's pretty sad over losing his gods. And and they, he, think of the loss. What would it be if somebody, how would we feel if somebody came and took our God away from us? That could be a traumatic experience. But the thing is, if it's an idol that you have made that is your God, then somebody can come take it away from you. Isaiah 44 is a great passage to look at here. Isaiah 44, 9 to 20. And and there's a couple other places. Habakkuk 2 is another place that I've got written down here. I think there's another place or two in Isaiah as well where some of these similar thoughts are listed. But to those who fashion a graven image are all of them, and their precious things are of no profit. Even their own witnesses fail to see or know, so that they will be put to shame. Who has fashioned a god or cast an idol to no profit? Behold, all his companions will be put to shame, for the craftsmen themselves are mere men. Let them all assemble themselves, let them stand up, let them tremble, let them together be put to shame. The man shapes iron into a cutting tool and does his work over the coals, fashioning it with hammers and working it with his strong arm. He also gets hungry and his strength fails. He drinks no water and becomes weary. Another shapes wood. He extends a measuring line. He outlines it with red chalk. He works it with planes and outlines it with a compass and makes it like the form of a man and the beauty of a man, so that it may sit in a house. Surely he cuts cedars for himself and takes a cypress or an oak and raises it for himself among the trees of the forest. He plants a fir, and the rain makes it grow. Then it becomes something for a man to burn, so he takes one of them and warms himself. He also makes a fire to bake bread. He also makes a god and worships it. He makes it into a graven image and falls down before it. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over this half he eats meat as he roasts a roast and is satisfied, and he also warms himself and says, "Aha, I am warm, I've seen the fire." But the rest of it he makes into a god, his graven image. He falls down before it and worships. He also prays to it and says, "Deliver me, for thou art my God." They do not know, nor do they understand, for he has smeared over their eyes so that they cannot see, and their hearts so they cannot comprehend. And no one recalls, nor is there knowledge or understanding to say, "I have burned half of it in the fire, and I have also baked bread over its coals. I roast meat and eat it. Then I make the rest of it into an abomination. I fall down before a block of wood." He feeds on ashes. A deceived heart has turned him aside, and he cannot deliver himself, nor say, "Is there not a lie in my right hand?" That is so fittingly describes the condition of someone who would fashion an idol out of a block of wood and then bow down and worship it. You're a man. You cut down the tree. You are carving the idol, and as you're carving the idol, you get hungry and tired and thirsty because you're just a man. You can't even make an idol without needing to rest. And then you cut that tree down that, by the way, God provided the rain for that tree to grow. And then you cut the tree down and you burn half of it for warmth. You burn some of it to cook your food on. And the other part you fashion into an idol. You might as well bow down and worship the ashes of the wood that you burned. It would do you as much good as bowing down to worship that idol. It's an abomination. It's useless. It's pointless. It's worthless. And Micah cries over it. Micah cries over it. Do we cry when we abandon God? Do we cry when we cast him aside the way that we could cast an idol aside? Think about what an idol is. If the idol somehow tells you some way you want to live or you should live, and you don't like what the idol says, you know what you can do? You just turn it around so it can't see you. You just put it in a drawer so it doesn't have any authority over you. Or you just decide that it told you to do something you do want to do. But with God, who is real, who is a person, who is a being, and he speaks to us through his word, and we don't like what he says, do we cast it aside like it's an idol? Do we weep over the way that we treat God, the way that Micah is weeping over losing his God? And so it's, as awful as this story is, I just find so many little pieces of it along the way where it causes us to reflect on our own condition, on our own relationship with God. And it's, you know, it's all for our learning. It's all for us to have an interaction with God's word so that we can learn from it. And so there's so many little nuggets like this along the way where we can, from this horrible story, we can learn so much. And then we have the ferocity of the Danites on display. You know, they threatened. Micah is their brother. Micah is their relative. Micah is from their tribe, from their clan, from their family, and they treat him like he's a foreigner. They treat him worse than they treat the foreigners in their own land that they should have been driving out. They should have been driving the foreigners out of the tribal lands that they were given to inherit, but they abandoned that, and they're willing to take a fight to their own kinsmen. And it just demonstrates their ferocity and their depravity.
One of the things I thought about here is, you know, turnabout is fair play. Micah got the money he got. He originally stole it from his mother, and then when he was threatened, he gave it back. And she decided to give it to him. That was fine. He used it to make idols for himself. I think that which verse is it now? I should have been looking down and doing this. So verse 24, Judges 18:24. There are times where we can kind of tell that the account is abridged, where not every single word here is exactly what they said, but it's kind of pared down. Like when they asked Micah in verse 4, he says, "Thus and so has Micah done to me." He didn't literally say that. He told him what happened. I kind of have to think that that's what the author's doing in verse 24. "You've taken away my gods, which I made." Is that something you would really think to say to somebody? I hope not. There'd be a ton of irony in it. But he made gods for himself so that he could enjoy them and worship them and get some good feelings out of it for himself and for his family, if they'll partake. And none of this was God's idea. This was done with money that was dedicated to God. So now the Danites come and they take the priest, which is something he hired. It was a hired hand, not one set up by God. So who's Micah to cry about it if someone he hired for a wage found a better wage and wants to work for someone else? The idols that he has here were dedicated to God. So if he truly believes his priest is a priest, it's up to the priest to use the money dedicated to God, right? It's not up to Micah. That was dedicated to God. The priest can take it with him if he wants. He set up a nice little system for himself where he thought he was kind of the winner, and that's not the case. In the system that Micah has set up, he's the loser. He doesn't realize it, but he's giving away control. He's giving away so much of what he should have and what he could have had. Not that he was doing the right things with it, but none of what he did was smart. None of what he did was God-honoring, and this is what happens. He got someone who's interested in money to control his stuff, and he uses stolen money dedicated to God to make an idol of it, and it all should leave him. Maybe if all of this stuff leaves him, he'll eventually see the error of his ways. That would be good for him, to be broken down by this, to go search for an actual Levite, to go search for actual knowledge about God. That would be good. And frankly, this would be a fair punishment from God. It's fair play. This is what he should get. Here, again, the Danites are in charge of their priest when they are communicating with Micah, when they're engaging with him. I don't know how much they were actually interested in engaging with him. They say, "What's the matter that you have assembled together?" So they do ask. They open negotiation. Do they ask God what they should do in this negotiation? Do they ask their priest what they should do in this negotiation? The only other time in Judges that I can really think of where we see any kind of extended negotiation is Jephthah. And in that, he is chosen by God to do this, to be the deliverer, to be the judge of the people. So when he negotiates, what does he bring up? What is the basis on which he negotiates? He goes back and he talks about the history of the interaction that God had with these other nations, and specifically with Moab, I think, if I'm remembering. And that's the basis on which he makes negotiations. That's not the basis on which they do it. They say, "I've got a bigger stick than you. Get out of here or I'll kill you. Stop bothering me." They don't try to judge righteously. They don't try to judge based on God's standards at all. And their priest isn't here to step up and censor them. He doesn't ask them, "Hey, if there was man who came into a Danite town and he brought his whole family and he stole from a Danite. What should we do to him? You know, he doesn't play the Nathan to David here. He doesn't do any of that. He doesn't try to help in any way. He just is like, well, these guys are paying me, so you probably should go. You know, he's on the side of the oppressor in this scenario. He's not leading them into God's will at all. He's here to get led to wherever they have money.
Yeah, there's just nobody righteous in the story. I wonder, something I hadn't thought about before, I wonder what this idol is supposed to, it just says he's a god. They made a god. They don't ever name it. I mean, if I always wish there's different details or something in a story, and I wonder, is it Baal, is it Asher, is it Marduk, is it, what God is it? Or is it supposed to be an image that represents Jehovah, that represents at least the God that they claim to, even though that doesn't make the story any better, because they're not supposed to do that anyway. In the Ten Commandments, don't make any graven image. You're not supposed to make an image that represents God. And so there's no good spin to put on it, but it strikes me as like, what God was the Danites, what God were they worshiping before they left their home and went on this trip? And now they walk up to this random house and they say, oh, you have a God? Well, bring it with us and we'll worship that one. What God is this that they just decide they're going to start worshiping now? It seems it's very odd to me. Chuck?
I think that, whenever they were going to spy out the land, they inquired, they asked the priests, inquire of God for us, if we're going to prosper or whatever,
Yeah.
So, it's ironic, that they would do that, and yet here they are with this graven image, this
Yeah.
God that's going to make things right for them or whatever.
Yeah, God, their view of who God is very fluid at best, I guess, or very nebulous about, just ask whichever God or whatever representation of God you want that to be. Well, could we do it? Could we finish up chapter 18 real quick here? Maybe.
He said, oh, Tom said, all right.
Go.
27 through 31. Then they took what Micah had made, and the priest who had belonged to him, and came to Laish, to a people quiet and secure, and struck them with the edge of the sword, and they burned the city with fire. And there was no one to deliver them, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone, and they were in the valley which is near Beth Rahab. And they rebuilt the city and lived in it. They called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born in Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. The sons of Dan set up for themselves a graven image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up for themselves Micah's graven image, which he had made all the time that the house of God was at Shiloh.
Okay, so there's a couple of time markers there for us. They set up the graven image, it said, from the time until the day of the captivity of the land. That's way off into the future if we're talking about Assyrian captivity, when the northern kingdoms are taken after the time of Isaiah, all the way down to that time. So, or all the time the house of God was at Shiloh. Well, that's not quite as long, because that's during the days of the reign of King David, when he brings the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh down to Jerusalem. And so, either way, it's a good long time that this graven image is set up as an idol that the Danites are worshiping. So ultimately, the question is, was it worth it to take the easy path? Think of all they got. They got a really easily won city. They rebuilt that city and were able to name that city after their father and hold that city for hundreds of years. It's stood for a long time, but was it worth it? because it was an outpost of idolatry for the duration of that period of land. Even during the time when there were faithful kings, King Solomon, King David, King Saul while he was faithful, even, then once it becomes part of the northern kingdom, there are no good kings. And ultimately, during the days of the northern divided kingdom, Dan is going to be the site of one of the golden calves that is set up to keep the people from going to Jerusalem to worship. And so Dan is such a hotbed of idolatry through the early years that eventually it becomes a major place of idolatry in the divided kingdom. That's the legacy of this story. How does this city become? How does it come to be? Because of what happens during the time of the judges. And so their legacy is a legacy of idolatry. And that's a tragic ending for the story.
One of the last things I had here is just that the Danites lived like the world. They were tired of their oppressors. They were tired of the people they couldn't drive out. They were tired of not having and owning something that was theirs. And instead of dealing with it, instead of engaging in struggle with that like God had initially wanted them to, they just become oppressors of somebody else. Well, if someone's trying to take our stuff, I'll just go take from somebody else. It's like watching toddlers try to play with toys. It's not right. Last thing, we already kind of touched on this idea, is the son of whom. But the NASB reads in verse 30 that it's the son of Gershom, son of Manasseh. If I recall correctly, other versions say Moses, and there's a script here that says some ancient versions read Moses. The one that is used to say Manasseh, and again, I've read this, I don't know any Hebrew, but that it looks like a superscript letter was added, which then makes the name Manasseh. I don't know how their syllables work, but I guess it makes sense.
In Hebrew, there's one letter difference between the name Manasseh and Moses, and the text where it looks like it's the name Manasseh looks like somebody kind of squeezed a letter in to make it Manasseh instead of Moses. Some people think maybe they did that because they wanted to protect the name of Moses. We don't want somebody that closely related to Moses being the bad guy in the story. So,
However,
that's speculation, but who knows?
That's a son of Manasseh would not have been a Levite unless there was a bunch of intermarriage. Son of Moses, and Moses had a son named Gershom. Son of Gershom was certainly a Levite. So it seems pretty likely. Chuck?
The time period, though, he couldn't be the literal grandson of Gershom, because, you've got a long period of time there where they were...
That would put it early in the time of Judges. If it was the grandson of Moses, Moses...
Grandson of
Manasseh.
Because...
that would have been too far removed.
Then you'd be using son of in a figurative sense rather than
a descendant of
Yeah.
Manasseh,
which it is used as that.
or the possibility that there's, they reuse names just like we do. You're not the first Chuck in the world, and I'm not the first Jason, so they reuse names. It could have just been people that we don't, that we don't know, and so there is always that possibility. All right, we're past time. We will start chapter 19 next week. Parker, don't turn off the PowerPoint computer. I'm going to try to make this one work. Thank you.